What's up, guys? This is TheKephas.
So it's probably no secret by now that I love the Bible. I've grown up with it, I've read it more times than I can count. Bible stories were part of my childhood right along with cartoons and video games. David and Goliath, Daniel in the Lion's Den, Jonah and the Whale, all of it. And for most of my life, I was taught to see the Bible primarily as a Christian book, obviously. It's an instruction book specifically for believers in how to live your life if you want God's approval. But over time, especially as I've gotten older, I've started to notice something else. There are parts of the Bible that aren't really about doctrine at all. They're not preachy or trying to convert you, they're simply wrestling with life as it actually is, in the same way that most of us do throughout our lives. So even if you don't believe in God, as I do, there's wisdom there that still hits uncomfortably close to home. For me, that's especially true of what's called the wisdom literature, which includes Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. Now, these books are usually read separately. Proverbs for quick wisdom nuggets, Ecclesiastes when you want something poetic or depressing, and then there's Job, when you want a story about suffering. A lot of suffering, but also about faith that can endure it. But I no longer think these books are meant to be read in isolation. I think they function more like a conversation, almost like a trilogy. 3 perspectives about life that correct, challenge, and deepen each other. And when you read them that way, they say something far more honest and far more human than the oversimplified versions we usually hear. So let's start with Proverbs. It's often treated like a rule book for life. Do this and things will go well. Avoid that and you'll be safe. If you fear God, work hard, tell the truth, and live wisely, then life will reward you. And to be fair, that's not entirely wrong, but it's also incomplete. I like to think of Proverbs less like a contract and more like medical advice. If your doctor tells you to eat better, exercise, and sleep more, chances are you'll be healthier. Your quality of life will probably improve. You'll likely live longer. But none of that is guaranteed. You can do everything right and still get sick. You can follow every guideline and still get hit by something you never saw coming. Genetics, accidents, random events, things completely outside your control. Proverbs works the same way. It gives wisdom that increases the odds of a good life. It does not promise outcomes. But when we read it alone, we often turn probability into certainty. We treat wisdom like gravity, as if the universe owes us a return on good behavior. And that's where Ecclesiastes enters the conversation. If Proverbs is like an optimistic teacher, Ecclesiastes is the older philosopher who's lived long enough to know better. Ecclesiastes looks at that tidy worldview and says, yeah, that's not actually how life works. Life is short. You're here and then you're gone. The righteous and the wicked die all the same. The fastest runner doesn't always win the race. The strongest army doesn't always win the battle, and the most qualified person doesn't always get the job. Time and chance happen to everyone. Ecclesiastes often makes people uncomfortable because when you read it, suddenly that safe, predictable worldview starts to crack. Ecclesiastes introduces us to the word hevel, often translated as meaningless, but that's not quite right. The word really means vapor, smoke, something you can see but can't hold on to. The harder you try to grasp it, the faster it slips through your fingers. That's how life feels. The teacher, Kohelet, tries everything people usually chase for meaning. First is wealth. He gets rich, builds things, accumulates more than enough, and then realizes he has no control of what happens to it after he's gone. So then he tries pleasure, wine, enjoyment, indulgence, and discovers that pleasure has diminishing returns. What once felt good eventually feels empty. So then he seeks knowledge and wisdom, develops a big brain, broadens his understanding. only to realize that once again, when you die, all of that disappears. Even righteousness, trying to be the best possible person and finding out that moral perfection is exhausting, impossible, and doesn't shield you from suffering anyway. Everything he tries turns out to be hevel. But here's the important part, the part that most people misunderstand. Ecclesiastes is not saying that life has no meaning. It's saying that nothing under the sun carries ultimate meaning by itself. Money isn't meaningless, neither is pleasure or wisdom or even work. They just can't carry the weight we put on them. So where does meaning show up? According to the teacher of Ecclesiastes, it shows up in the ordinary, in the daily, in enjoying your work, enjoying a good meal, and companionship, living the day you actually have instead of constantly chasing the one you think will finally make life feel complete. Life isn't found in some future payoff, it's found in the living of it. And I want to be clear here because this is where people often misunderstand me. This is not follow your heart theology. The Bible never tells us to follow our hearts. It assumes we already will. That's why there's so much wisdom literature in the first place. Humans are desire-driven creatures. We always move toward what we love. The question is not whether you'll follow your heart. The question is whether your heart is well formed. Meaning, then, is not arbitrary, but it is personal. Scripture assumes different callings, different gifts, different lives. Some are called to one thing, while some are called to another. Faithfulness is not one size fits all. It's measured in proportion to who you are, what you've been given, and where you actually are in life. And that brings us to Job, the test case. Job lives the Proverbs life. He's righteous, faithful, generous, honest, and by Proverbs logic, his life reflects that. He's wealthy, respected, has a family. He's the example. And then everything collapses. He loses his wealth, his children, his health, even his closest relationships turn against him. His friends sit with him in silence, which is the best thing they do. And then they start talking. And that's where it all goes wrong. Because they assume what so many people assume. If something bad happened, you must have done something wrong. Suffering must be deserved. God must be punishing you. Job insists that's not true. He hasn't done anything to deserve this, and the tension escalates until Job finally snaps and demands an answer from God. And this is the part that often gets sanitized, because make no mistake, Job is angry. He protests, he argues, he says things that sound dangerously close to accusation. And God shows up. God affirms Job, not because Job was right about everything, but because Job was honest. God rebukes the friends because their theology was neat, safe, and kind of cruel. They defended God at the cost of their friend. But God never explains Job's suffering. Instead, God expands the frame. He points to creation, complexity, chaos, mystery, limits, and the message is essentially this: you are not in control of the universe, and you were never meant to be. That's not an insult, it's reality. And when faced with that reality, Job humbles himself, not because he got answers, but because he realized the question itself had limits. And then life goes on. Job recovers, he rebuilds, he has more children, but nothing replaces what was lost. The story doesn't pretend otherwise. It simply tells the truth. Good things happen to bad people. Bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to good people, and bad things happen to everyone. Life is unpredictable. And for me, this isn't theoretical. I was born visually impaired. I grew up in church spaces that deeply believed in divine healing. People prayed for me constantly, and when I wasn't healed, the explanations started. At first, it was gentle. God has a plan. It'll happen in time. And then it got darker. Maybe there's sin. Maybe you lack faith. That theology couldn't tolerate unanswered suffering, so it put the burden on me. And that hurts in ways that are hard to explain. Not just because it's cruel, but because it's rooted in fear. People don't want to accept that suffering can be undeserved, because if it's undeserved, it could happen to them too. That's why Job exists. That's why Jesus, when asked about the man born blind, rejected the question entirely. Who sinned? And Jesus says, you're asking the wrong question. Sometimes suffering just is, and the call is not to explain it away, but to bear one another's burdens through it. That's where meaning actually shows up. Not in control or in certainty, but in presence, faithfulness, living your life fully as the person you actually are. For me, that means enjoying my kids, playing video games without guilt, creating because I love it, working with my whole heart, not because it guarantees outcomes, but because it's the life I've been given. If life is a gift offered back to God, then the offering is not perfection, it's honesty, it's fullness, and it's showing up as yourself. Because that's what God sees, no matter how hard we try to pretend otherwise. And that is what I think the wisdom literature teaches. Live wisely, but don't confuse wisdom with control. Accept limits, enjoy your days, be present, and don't let suffering convince you that your life has lost its worth, because it hasn't. That's the wisdom I've learned. And if it helps you live a little more honestly too, then I think it's worth sharing.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is TheKephas. Until next time.